Get those forward deflectors online, now! Admiral Vokar's voice cut through the command deck like a serrated blade, each word a precise strike. His second-in-command, Officer Jarley, sprang into action, issuing rapid commands to the crew, who scrambled to adjust the shimmering energy barriers around their vessel. The Turksian ship trembled as meteorite fragments scraped its hull, sending tremors through the framework. Vokar's segmented eyes flicked to the tactical display. Evasive action. I don't want another dent on this hull. Course adjusted, Admiral, Jarley replied, her tone clipped. The ship twisted elegantly between jagged asteroid remnants, the glow of distant stars casting streaks of light across the metallic floor. As the Terxian vessel skirted danger, Earth loomed into view. A swirling orb of blue and green, vibrant against the velvet darkness of space. The sight pulled at Vokar's rarely stirred curiosity. Earth, he muttered, the syllables foreign in his mouth. He folded his hands behind his back, claws lightly tapping against his carapace. The species here believes itself on the verge of interstellar readiness. Let's see if their actions align with their confidence. Jarley glanced at him sideways. You think they could pose a threat, Admiral? Vokar's mandibles shifted slightly, a gesture of measured thought. Number. But underestimating a species with a penchant for survival has ended many campaigns prematurely. Prepare the shuttle. I'll go alone. The command deck fell silent, save for the low vibration of the ship's atmospheric calibrators. Jarley hesitated. Alone? Is that wise, Admiral? Wisdom, he said, stepping toward the bay doors, lies in understanding. I need to see their metal up close. The human cityscape sprawled beneath Vokar's descending shuttle, its dazzling lights flickering like scattered embers across a charcoal expanse. It was chaos disguised as structure, a labyrinth of shimmering towers and winding streets. The air buzzed with electromagnetic currents, a sign of their crude but functional technology. Vokar landed near what humans labeled an entertainment center, an unassuming structure pulsating with activity. He donned his holographic disguise, a middle-aged human male with short graying hair and sharp features. His Terxian physiology, bristling with antennae and hardened exoskeleton, dissolved into the illusion as he stepped onto the bustling pavement. The cacophony hit him like a physical force, clattering machinery, bursts of laughter, and the rhythmic clinking of metallic tokens. Human scents, sweet, savory, musky, mingled in the air, each more pungent than the last. It was sensory overload, and Vokar's neural augmentations struggled to dampen the onslaught. Inside, the establishment called itself Galaxy Games Arena. Holographic banners floated above the crowd, displaying rotating images of starships, alien landscapes, and glowing accolades. His focus sharpened as he spotted a cluster of humans gathered near a central console. A boy, no older than 14 standard Earth years, sat at the controls. His fingers flew across the console with uncanny precision, a symphony of taps and swipes. On the display, a starship twisted through a simulated asteroid field, its thrusters pulsing with calculated bursts of light. The boy's brows furrowed as he murmured to himself, "Left, drop to 3% thrust, pivot now!" The ship executed a spiraling maneuver, narrowly dodging a collision with an asteroid. Vokar leaned closer, his augmented vision dissecting the display. The boy had used the asteroid's gravitational pull to slingshot the ship into position, a technique taught only in advanced Terxian war academies. "Impressive," Vokar muttered, his tone betraying a note of disbelief. The boy, Elias, according to the murmurs of the surrounding crowd, didn't look up. His eyes were locked on the screen, his concentration unyielding. "Warning, hostile craft detected," the simulator announced. The sleek, angular designs of enemy ships appeared on the display, converging on Elias's position like vultures circling prey. Elias's lips pressed into a thin line. "All right, let's see if they like a taste of this." He redirected power from his ship's shields to its engines, accelerating toward the cluster of hostiles. The crowd gasped as the boy's ship appeared to dive straight into danger. At the last moment, he released a payload of ion flares, scattering the enemy formation. "That was reckless," Vokar said aloud. though his words were drowned out by the cheers of onlookers. As the simulation's final wave commenced, Vokar observed Elias's decision-making with growing unease. The boy's tactics were unorthodox yet devastatingly effective. Improvised ambushes, resourceful use of terrain, and feints that drew enemy fire into empty space. When the simulation ended, the screen lit up with a bold declaration: new high score, tactical rating, superior. The crowd erupted in applause, but Elias only leaned back, exhaling sharply. He wiped his hands on his jeans, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "You were cutting it close there," a nearby teen commented. "Close is all you need if you're fast enough," Elias replied, a glint of confidence in his eyes. Vokar stepped forward, his holographic guise blending seamlessly into the throng. "That maneuver with the ion flares," he said, his voice measured. "Where did you learn it?" Elias turned, surprised by the question. Just picked it up playing. You gotta be quick with patterns, you know? The computer's predictable once you figure out its rhythm." Vokar's brow furrowed, the boy's words echoing in his mind. "And do you think these patterns could apply outside this game?" Elias laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Sure, if you've got a starship lying around. But it's just a game, mister." Vokar glanced back at the screen, where the detailed simulation continued cycling. The gravitational pulls, heat signatures, and weapons mechanics. It all felt too real. Far too real. The simulation wasn't a game. It was a training ground, hiding in plain sight. The simulation screen dimmed as Elias leaned back in his chair, stretching with a casual confidence that belied the intensity of his performance moments before. Around him, the crowd buzzed like an unstable energy field, voices crackling with excitement as they dissected the game's latest heroics. Yet Admiral Vokar's focus remained unbroken, his segmented gaze locked onto the boy like a targeting beacon. "Just a game," Vokar repeated quietly, the phrase both perplexing and unsettling. His neural interface replayed fragments of the simulation, the calculated timing, the tactical foresight, the precision of execution. It wasn't just skill. It was instinct, born of something deeper, something learned. He stepped closer, his holographic projection masking his alien presence as his imposing frame cast a shadow over the boy. Elias noticed and tilted his head upward, a flicker of wariness in his eyes. "Need something else, mister?" His voice was casual, but the sharp edge of curiosity lurked beneath the surface. "I've never seen anyone fly like that," Vokar said, his words deliberately measured, each syllable probing for a response. "You have the reflexes of a trained pilot." Elias chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess I play too much. My mom says I should spend more time outdoors." His laugh was thin, almost forced, like a shield hastily raised to deflect deeper questions. Vokar folded his arms, leaning just enough to lower his voice. "Where did you learn to use the asteroid's pull as a slingshot? That's not something you just pick up." Elias shrugged, but his expression tightened, betraying a flicker of discomfort. "The simulator teaches stuff. Physics patterns. You figure out tricks. It's not a big deal." "Tricks?" Vokar's voice sharpened, enough to make the boy flinch. He softened his tone immediately. "Forgive me, I'm only curious. It's rare to see someone with such aptitude." Elias's wariness ebbed slightly, replaced by a flicker of pride. "It's not that hard if you know how things move. The computer's predictable, and once you learn the models, it's just about staying ahead." He hesitated, then added, "You'd be surprised what you can learn when you're having fun." That phrase, having fun, landed like a silent detonation in Vokar's mind. On Turksian warships, training was grueling, each exercise designed to strip cadets of individuality and force absolute precision. Yet here, this boy spoke of mastering advanced concepts with an ease that bordered on defiance. He straightened, his mind racing. "Would you show me how it works?" Elias blinked, caught off guard. "You want to play? No offense, but it's not really for beginners." "I can learn," Vokar replied, his lips curling into a faint imitation of a smile. "Perhaps you'll teach me." The boy's brows furrowed as he studied the stranger. Finally, he shrugged and gestured to the console. All right, let's see what you got. Vokar sat, the chair's soft material unfamiliar against his rigid posture. The console glowed to life, its surface rippling with projected light as the simulator booted a new scenario. Elias leaned over, his proximity radiating youthful enthusiasm. This one's simple, Elias said. Escort a convoy through a debris field. Don't lose too many ships, or the mission fails. Simple? Vokar thought grimly. His clawed fingers hovered just above the interface, his neural augmentations silently translating the controls into a tactile map of the system. With a tentative flick, he activated the ship's thrusters, the simulated vessel lurching forward like a newborn trying to walk. You're burning too much fuel, Elias said, his tone exasperated but not unkind. Feather the thrust. Tap, don't hold. Vokar adjusted, his movements growing more deliberate. The simulated starship responded sluggishly, scraping against a floating fragment of wreckage. The impact jolted the screen with red warnings. Elias winced. You're not looking at the field. Map it in your head. Where's the debris moving? Your sensors should do that, Vokar countered, his voice tight with frustration. Sure, if you trust them not to glitch when things get intense. Elias pointed at a flashing cluster of shapes on the edge of the display. What do you do now? Vokar's gaze darted to the indicators. Enemy signatures. The ship's targeting array painted them in red, their movements erratic but converging fast. His training surged forward like an old reflex. Raise shields! Defensive formation! Wrong, Elias snapped, shaking his head. That'll box you in. You've got to bait them into overextending, like this. His fingers darted across the auxiliary controls, taking temporary command of the ship. The simulated vessel rolled sharply, skimming the edge of a debris cloud. One pursuing fighter collided with the wreckage, disintegrating in a burst of light. Surprising, Vokar admitted, the faintest note of admiration creeping into his tone. You don't fight where they expect you, Elias said, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. Make them guess. Keep them chasing shadows. Vokar returned control to his own hands, his movements more precise now. He navigated the ship through the remaining debris, mimicking the boy's earlier tactics. By the time the convoy reached safety, his score flashed on the screen. Mission complete. Tactical rating, moderate. Not bad for a first try, Elias said, grinning. But Vokar wasn't listening. His neural interface dissected the mission data, analyzing every maneuver, every adjustment. The mechanics were familiar, yes, but the logic, the creativity, it was unlike anything he'd encountered. The boy tapped a control, pulling up a new screen. Want to see something cooler? This is the next level. Before Vokar could answer, the simulation shifted to a starfield bristling with asteroid belts and hostile ships. But Vokar's attention was elsewhere, his gaze narrowing as he scanned the edges of the display. His augmented vision detected subtle markers embedded within the simulation, markers unmistakably similar to classified Terxian war codes. Elias, Vokar said, his voice low. Who made this game? Elias blinked. I don't know. Some big company. They hired a bunch of ex-pilots and science people to make it realistic. Why? Vokar leaned back, his mind ablaze with implications. The simulations weren't just realistic. They were authentic, built on principles far too advanced for casual entertainment. Someone, somewhere, had armed humanity with knowledge they shouldn't possess. I need to see more, he said abruptly, his tone firm. Elias tilted his head, puzzled. You okay, mister? You're acting kind of intense. Vokar forced a smile, though his mind churned with unease. Just eager to learn. As the next simulation loaded, Vokar's claws tapped nervously against the console's edge. For the first time in decades, the seasoned admiral felt a flicker of something dangerously close to fear. If this boy's casual skill was any indication of humanity's broader potential, the Terxian Empire had gravely underestimated its newest rivals. The simulation's shifting starfields pulsed with soft brilliance, casting a kaleidoscope of light across Vokar's stern features. He clenched the console's edge, his fingers curling into the material as the scenario began. A simulated starship ambushed by an overwhelming force, its survival dependent on the player's tactical ingenuity. Elias leaned back in his seat, his posture effortlessly relaxed. "This one's tougher," he said, his tone carrying the casual confidence of someone who had long since mastered its intricacies. "The goal is to disable the enemy flagship without losing your support craft." Vokar barely acknowledged the boy's words. His segmented gaze scanned the interface, picking apart every layer of the simulation. Beneath the surface-level chaos of flashing lasers and spiraling ships, he could sense something deeper, a design too intricate for entertainment alone. His neural augments flagged anomalies in the data streams, fragments of code with patterns he hadn't seen since his academy days. The boy's fingers danced across the controls, his movements fluid yet precise. "You've got to think about momentum in this one," Elias explained. "The flagship's shields are weak near the engines, but you only get one good shot before their reinforcements arrive." Vokar's mandibles twitched, though his disguise rendered the movement invisible. "Where did you say this game came from again?" Elias shrugged without taking his eyes off the screen. "Some big company. Aegis Dynamics, I think. They're always talking about realistic training for the future, or whatever." He smirked, adding, "But for us, it's just a game. A crazy good one." The boy's ship executed a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding an explosion that rippled across the display. The vibrations of the console thrummed through Vokar's hands, the feedback eerily close to the sensation of piloting a real vessel. "Realistic training for the future?" Vokar echoed under his breath. His thoughts churned as he watched Elias decimate the enemy fleet with an elegance that felt almost instinctual. These weren't the movements of a child indulging in idle recreation. They were the maneuvers of a tactician, unorthodox, yet devastatingly effective. The screen flickered as the boy achieved his objective, the enemy flagship disintegrating in a cascade of simulated debris. Elias leaned back with a grin. "See? Easy when you know what to look for." But Vokar didn't respond. His focus had shifted to the game's post-mission analytics, a wealth of tactical data displayed in unnerving detail. The system cataloged every action, analyzed every outcome, and provided efficiency ratings with military precision. He felt his chest tighten as a realization struck him with the force of a meteorite. This wasn't just a game. It was a training platform, one far more advanced than any tool the Terxian Empire had ever developed. "Elias," Vokar said, his voice low and deliberate, "have you ever wondered why this game feels so advanced?" The boy frowned, glancing at him with a flicker of suspicion. "Not really. I mean, it's supposed to be cutting edge, right? That's the whole point." "And the people playing it?" Vokar pressed. "Do they all perform like you?" Elias chuckled. "Not even close. Some people are just here for fun, but there's a group of us who take it seriously. We've got tournaments, forums, even strategy guides." His eyes gleamed as he added, "The best players? They're insane. There's this one guy who cracked the AI's response algorithm. He says it's built on some kind of neural network that adapts to your playstyle." Vokar's mind raced, each new detail fitting into a troubling picture. Neural networks, realistic physics, tactical depth beyond anything his empire had conceived. Someone was using this platform to forge a generation of strategists, and the implications sent an icy ripple through his exoskeleton. His neural interface pinged softly, a reminder of his original mission. He pushed aside his growing unease and focused on the boy. "Can this Aegis Dynamics platform be accessed outside of these centers?" "Of course," Elias replied. "Most people play at home. They've got this crazy setup for full immersion, haptic feedback, neural syncing, the works." "Neural syncing?" Vokar's voice betrayed his disbelief. "You're saying civilians have access to such technology?" Elias nodded. "Yeah, it's expensive, but a lot of people save up for it. Makes the game way more intense." He glanced at Vokar, his expression thoughtful. "Why are you asking so many questions anyway? You're not from around here, are you?" The admiral stiffened, his mind scrambling for an excuse. "I'm studying human culture," he said carefully. I find your innovations fascinating." Elias didn't look convinced, but before he could press further, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Two uniformed men strode into the arena, their clipped movements and sharp gazes marking them as professionals. Vokar recognized the type instantly. Intelligence agents, likely sent to monitor this so-called game. His disguise held, but their presence only deepened his unease. If humans were investing such resources in a mere simulation, what else were they hiding? Elias followed his gaze, his grin faltering. Uh-oh. That's the tournament crew. They're usually here to scout players. If they see you flailing around, they'll definitely laugh. Vokar's attention snapped back to the boy. Tournament crew? Yeah, Elias said, lowering his voice. They're military guys, I think. They recruit the best players for testing new scenarios. Kind of like being drafted, but cooler. The pieces clicked into place with chilling clarity. This wasn't just a training tool. It was a recruitment mechanism, designed to identify and cultivate the brightest tactical minds. The implications stretched far beyond what he'd anticipated. I need to see more of this game, Vokar said, rising from his seat. His tone was sharp enough to make Elias flinch. The boy raised an eyebrow, his playful demeanor replaced with wary curiosity. What's your deal, mister? You act like this is life or death. Vokar hesitated, his claws flexing beneath his disguise. Sometimes, games are more important than they seem. Elias snorted, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. Well, good luck beating the next level. You'll need it. As Vokar turned to leave, his neural interface flagged another anomaly. The encrypted patterns in the simulation's data were growing more frequent, their origins concealed behind layers of digital obfuscation. Someone, or something, was hiding the true purpose of this platform, and he was determined to uncover it. The air outside the arena felt heavier, as if the weight of his discovery pressed down on the atmosphere itself. The distant roar of traffic and the sharp tang of industrial smoke filled his senses, a reminder of humanity's chaotic ingenuity. His communicator chimed, Yarley's voice breaking through the static. Admiral, we've detected an increase in encrypted transmissions from Earth's surface. Should we investigate further? Vokar's mandibles clicked faintly. Number, not yet. Continue monitoring. I'll report my findings soon. As he strode toward his shuttle, his mind churned with possibilities. Humanity was no longer the unorganized, primitive species the Terxian Empire had dismissed. They were evolving, their ingenuity transforming even leisure into tools of warfare. And if this so-called game was any indication, they were preparing for something far greater than anyone realized. The metallic hiss of the shuttle's closing hatch reverberated in Vokar's ears, a sound sharper than he anticipated. Seated in the cramped cabin, he adjusted the holographic matrix around his form, ensuring his human guise remained flawless. His neural interface buzzed softly, processing the encrypted transmissions he'd intercepted from the Earth Entertainment Center. The patterns he'd uncovered earlier now flickered in his mind's eye, forming fragments of a puzzle still maddeningly incomplete. Yarley, he said, his voice cutting through the cabin's sterile atmosphere. Begin analyzing the intercepted data. Look for correlations between Earth's tactical simulations and our classified military archives. The Terxian officer's reply crackled through the communicator. Preliminary scans suggest a 72% overlap in strategic framework. This is not coincidental, Admiral. It never is. Vokar's claws tapped against the armrest, the sound oddly hollow. He gazed out at the Earth below, its continent stitched together by glowing threads of human infrastructure. From this distance, it appeared fragile, yet there was a tenacity woven into every light. The shuttle banked left, descending toward the rendezvous point, a concealed Terxian observation station on Earth's lunar surface. As it landed with a subtle shudder, Vokar stepped out into the stark, silvery expanse of the moon's surface. The air inside his helmet was sharp, recycled, and sterile, a constant reminder of his alien nature. Inside the station, the command room pulsed with energy. Screens displayed a web of activity, from Earth's bustling cities to the scattered constellations of orbital satellites. Yarly stood at the central console, her antennae twitching with restrained agitation. "Admiral," she began, gesturing toward the holographic display, "we've traced the origin of the simulation data. It's routed through an obscure satellite cluster, masked under the guise of civilian telecommunications." "And the source?" Vokar demanded, stepping closer. The soft glow of the display illuminated the ridges of his carapace. "It leads to a facility in Earth's northern hemisphere," Yarly replied. "Aegis Dynamics headquarters." The name triggered an immediate cascade of alerts in Vokar's neural interface. He accessed the Terxian archives, scanning the company's records. On the surface, it appeared to be a conglomerate specializing in virtual entertainment and aerospace research. But beneath the veneer of corporate ambition lay something darker: connections to human military projects, contracts for experimental weapon systems, and a disturbing emphasis on neural link technology. "Are they aware of our presence?" Vokar asked. Yarly hesitated. "Uncertain. Their transmissions show no signs of direct surveillance, but their technology is sophisticated." Vokar narrowed his eyes, studying the streams of data flowing across the holographic interface. "Sophisticated enough to train their populace in interstellar warfare. Their games are breeding soldiers, Yarley, and I believe Aegis Dynamics is at the heart of it." Hours later, Vokar stood in the facility's shadow, cloaked in his holographic disguise. The compound was an architectural fortress of steel and glass, its sharp lines glowing faintly under the cover of night. He moved with calculated precision, his footsteps soundless against the pavement. The air was damp, carrying a faint metallic tang from the nearby industrial zone. As he approached the perimeter, his neural interface detected faint security grids, infrared beams, pressure-sensitive tiles, and motion scanners. He paused, calibrating his stealth field to blend seamlessly with the environment. The world around him seemed to ripple as the field engaged, rendering him almost imperceptible. Slipping past the outer defenses, he entered the facility through a side corridor. The interior was sterile and unyielding, the walls a stark contrast to the chaotic vibrance of the human entertainment center. His sensory processors picked up the faint hum of electricity coursing through the building, a subtle undercurrent of energy that seemed to seep into the very air. Navigating the labyrinthine hallways, Vokar found his way to the heart of the facility, a vast control room bathed in the cold light of holographic displays. Rows of technicians sat at consoles, their eyes glued to streams of data. The room buzzed with activity, voices murmuring in clipped, urgent tones. Vokar's gaze fixed on the central display, a massive screen depicting a live simulation. It was eerily familiar, human players commanding fleets, their decisions dissected and analyzed in real time. But this was no entertainment program. The tactical overlays and performance metrics mirrored the exacting standards of a military command center. "They're testing scenarios," Vokar murmured to himself, his voice a low growl, preparing for something. A sudden shift in the room's energy caught his attention. The technicians straightened, their murmurs subsiding as a figure entered. A tall man with a commanding presence and sharp, calculating eyes. His voice carried a weight that silenced the room. "Status report," the man demanded, his tone brisk. "Simulations show a 98% success rate for defensive tactics," one of the technicians replied. "Offensive maneuvers are at 87%, but adaptation to unpredictable variables remains an issue." The man's lips tightened. "Unacceptable. Expand the neural link network. Increase the difficulty curve. Humanity cannot afford mediocrity." Vokar's claws flexed involuntarily. The man's words were a stark confirmation of his fears. This wasn't preparation for exploration or defense. It was preparation for war. As the technicians returned to their tasks, Vokar's neural interface flagged a new transmission originating from the facility. He intercepted it, his augments decrypting the stream with surgical precision. The message was brief but chilling. Phase 1 nearing completion. Target readiness at 85%. Initiate final calibration. Vokar stepped back, his thoughts spiraling. Phase 1. Final calibration. The words painted a grim picture of intent. This wasn't a defensive measure, it was the precursor to an offensive strike. Before he could process further, an alarm pierced the air. Red lights bathed the room in a harsh glow, and the technicians scrambled to their stations. Vokar's stealth field faltered, momentarily revealing his distorted outline. The sharp-eyed man turned, his gaze locking onto Vokar's flickering form. "Security breach!" the man barked. "Lock down the facility!" Vokar's instincts took over. He sprinted down the corridor, his movements swift and calculated. Behind him, the sound of pursuing guards grew louder, their boots pounding against the floor like distant thunder. He reached a maintenance hatch, forcing it open and slipping into the narrow passage beyond. The air inside the vent was hot and stale, each breath searing his lungs. He crawled with relentless determination, his exoskeleton scraping against the metal walls. The sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the rhythmic thrum of machinery. Finally, he emerged outside, the night air cool against his heated carapace. He activated his communicator. "Jarley, I have confirmation. They're preparing for an offensive. This simulation network is a weapon." Jarley's voice crackled through the line. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Vokar's mandibles tightened. "Begin contingency planning. If they move to Phase 2, we must be ready to intercept." As he disappeared into the shadows, his thoughts were heavy with the implications of what he had witnessed. Humanity wasn't just evolving. They were preparing to rise, their games a harbinger of something far greater than anyone had imagined. The tactical holograms hovered like spectral diagrams in the command chamber of Vokar's lunar outpost. They flickered with restless energy, projecting the breadth of Earth's orbital network alongside the Terxian fleet's movement patterns. Vokar studied the display, his talons tracing arcs in the air as he calculated probabilities. "Admiral, the humans are mobilizing," Jarley announced, her voice sharp as a blade. Her antennae twitched toward the shimmering projection, which now showed clusters of Earth satellites reconfiguring their positions. "Mobilizing or adapting," Vokar muttered. His segmented eyes narrowed. "They've been playing war games in their simulations for years. They're not reacting. They're anticipating." Jarley tilted her head, her expression unreadable but tinged with unease. "Should we assume the worst?" Vokar straightened, his claws flexing against the armrest of his station. "Assume nothing. Expect everything." Suddenly, the holograms darkened, and a high-pitched alert screeched through the chamber. One of the junior officers turned toward Vokar, their tone brittle with panic. "Admiral, we've detected high-energy discharges near Earth's atmosphere. Weaponized plasma bursts." Vokar's mandibles clicked sharply. "Show me." The holographic display refocused, centering on the Earth's northern hemisphere. The bursts were concentrated around a specific sector, scattering debris across the atmosphere like shards of molten glass. Among the chaos, faint outlines of human spacecraft emerged, their designs sleek yet aggressive, like predatory birds of prey. "They've launched ships," Jarley said, her voice taut with urgency. "Not ships," Vokar corrected, his gaze unwavering. "Prototypes." The observation carried weight. These weren't mass-produced vessels. They were experimental crafts armed with cutting-edge technology, Earth's attempt to field-test the simulation's strategies in real combat. "Admiral," another officer interjected, "their fleet is expanding rapidly. More vessels are deploying from hidden orbital platforms." Vokar's neural interface surged with calculations, each one more concerning than the last. The humans weren't scrambling. They were executing a premeditated strategy. Each deployment was timed to perfection, each maneuver a seamless replication of the tactics Elias had demonstrated in the simulator. "Engage long-range scanners," Vokar ordered. "Find their command ship." A ripple of tension filled the room as officers complied, their movements brisk yet careful. Vokar leaned closer to the display, studying the humans' formation. Their command structure wasn't obvious. It was fluid, decentralized, almost chaotic. But it wasn't chaos. It was an orchestra of calculated improvisation. "They're not using a flagship," Jarley observed. "Their coordination is too distributed." Vokar's mandibles twitched in irritation. "Because they don't need one. They're operating like a neural network, adaptive, decentralized, and far more dangerous than a centralized fleet." A sudden flash on the display drew every eye in the room. A Terxian scout ship had been obliterated, its fragments scattering across the projection in jagged arcs. The humans had deployed a formation of their prototypes in a feint, baiting the scout into an ambush. "Admiral," Yarley pressed, "what are your orders?" Vokar's talons scraped against the armrest as he stared at the evolving battlefield. "Prepare the fleet for interception. Do not underestimate them. Every move they make is deliberate." The command center's atmosphere thickened as officers relayed the orders. Vokar's mind churned, recalling Elias's words during the simulator session. "You don't fight where they expect you." The memory now felt less like an observation and more like a warning. The Terxian fleet emerged from lunar orbit, their vessels gleaming like shards of obsidian against the void. Plasma arrays ignited along their hulls, casting an eerie glow that contrasted with Earth's soft, distant hues. The ships moved with calculated precision, their formations designed to encircle and neutralize any threat. But the humans were waiting. From the darkness of Earth's shadow emerged a swarm of small, agile craft. Their designs were unconventional, with jagged wings and irregular fuselages that defied traditional aerodynamics. Vokar's neural interface flagged the anomaly. These were not standard military models. They were engineered for unpredictability. The first wave struck with startling ferocity. Human ships darted between the Terxian vessels like insects evading swatting claws. They exploited gaps in the fleet's formation, weaving through plasma fire with a precision that bordered on reckless. "They're testing us," Yarley said, her tone measured. "Probing for weaknesses." "And they're finding them," Vokar growled. "Reconfigure our formation. Focus on overlap zones." The order was relayed, and the Terxian fleet adjusted. Their plasma cannons began firing in calculated patterns, creating a web of energy designed to trap the humans. But the humans responded in kind, exploiting the few milliseconds between volleys to escape the net. Vokar's gaze flicked across the battlefield, his mind a maelstrom of calculations. Every human maneuver mirrored tactics from their simulations, but with one crucial difference: the humans weren't constrained by the rigid doctrines of a military hierarchy. They adapted, they improvised, and they thrived in the chaos. "Admiral, we've lost 3 cruisers," Yarley reported, her voice strained. "Their prototypes are exploiting our blind spots." Vokar's mandibles clenched. "Redirect auxiliary power to sensor arrays. They're not invisible. We just haven't looked hard enough." The order was executed, and the sensors illuminated new patterns that revealed the humans' strategy. They weren't merely engaging in skirmishes. They were shepherding the Terxian fleet into a trap. "Admiral," Yarley said, her voice rising with urgency, "they're guiding us toward Jupiter's gravitational field." The realization hit Vokar like a shockwave. The humans were using the planet's immense gravity as a weapon, forcing the fleet into a precarious position where their maneuvers would be restricted. "Reverse course," Vokar barked. "Do not let them dictate the battlefield." But it was too late. A sudden burst of energy erupted from Jupiter's vicinity, a gravity wave generated by a human-crafted device. The wave disrupted the Terxian fleet's formation, scattering ships like leaves in a storm. Vokar's claws dug into the console as he issued rapid orders. "Regroup! Focus fire on their generators!" The battlefield descended into chaos. Terxian ships struggled to reform their lines, while human vessels exploited every gap with ruthless precision. The air inside the command center was electric with tension, each second stretching into eternity. As the skirmish raged on, Vokar's neural interface highlighted a new anomaly: a human ship breaking formation and diving directly toward the Terxian flagship. Its trajectory was erratic, its engines flaring with bursts of raw energy. "They're making a suicide run," Yarley said, her voice grim. "No," Vokar replied, his gaze narrowing. "They're making a statement." The human ship detonated just short of the flagship, releasing a cloud of electromagnetic interference that temporarily blinded the fleet's sensors. In the brief chaos, the humans regrouped, their formation tightening like a coiled spring. "They're forcing us into a defensive posture," Vokar said, his voice heavy. "And it's working." Yarley's antennae drooped slightly. "What are they fighting for?" Vokar's mandibles clicked softly as he stared at the battlefield. The right to survive. The words lingered in the air as the battle raged on, each moment bringing new challenges. And as Vokar watched the humans adapt and persevere, one question burned in his mind. What would they do next? The Terxian command chamber glowed dimly, its walls pulsing faintly with the energy of distant systems running on overdrive. Vokar stood rigid, his segmented gaze fixed on the shifting tactical hologram before him. The battlefield had become a brutal dance of precision and chaos, a storm of light and motion where every second decided lives. His claws hovered over the console, his every instinct screaming for action. But action without clarity was death. "Status," he snapped, his voice slicing through the charged air. Yarle moved closer, her steps precise yet heavy with tension. "The fleet has stabilized its formation near Europa's orbit. Losses are mounting, but we've managed to repel their forward scouts. However, their prototypes are regrouping near Callisto. They're preparing another wave." "Of course they are," Vokar muttered, his mandibles clicking faintly as his thoughts churned. The humans weren't retreating or faltering. They were gathering momentum, their tactics shifting with every new assault. Each clash revealed their ability to adapt, to twist what should have been insurmountable odds into fleeting opportunities. "Admiral," a junior officer called from the secondary console. His voice was strained, his antennae trembling as he gestured toward the hologram. "We've intercepted a communication from their fleet. It's fragmented, but the core message is clear. They're mobilizing for a coordinated push." "Forward it to my interface," Vokar commanded, his neural link sparking to life as the fragmented human transmission played in his mind. The clipped words carried urgency and resolve, punctuated by bursts of static. Yet amidst the chaos, a single phrase stood out. "Protect the anchor at all costs." Vokar's mandibles twitched. "The anchor," he murmured. Yarle cross-referenced that term against the intercepted tactical data. "Focus on their orbital deployment patterns." Yarle moved swiftly, her fingers darting across the console as she complied. The display shifted, highlighting the dense cluster of human vessels near Callisto. At its center was a single object, small, faintly glowing, but radiating an energy signature that made Vokar's claws tighten. "That," Yarle said, her voice tinged with alarm. "That's their anchor." The object was shielded by layers of human ships, its exact function obscured by interference. But Vokar didn't need detailed analysis to know its purpose. It was the keystone of their strategy, the axis around which their entire fleet moved. "They're not just fighting for survival," Vokar muttered, his voice low. "They're building something, and they've been building it under our noses." Yarle turned to him, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "If we eliminate the anchor, their coordination will collapse. But whatever it is, Admiral, they're protecting it with everything they have. Attacking directly will cost us heavily." Vokar stared at the hologram, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The Terxian way demanded precision and dominance, swift strikes that dismantled an enemy's capacity to resist. Yet the humans had weaponized unpredictability, their tactics woven with ingenuity and desperation. A direct assault could break their defenses, but at what cost? "Perhaps," Vokar said after a long pause, "there's another way." Yarle's antennae twitched in surprise. "Admiral?" Vokar turned toward her, his eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. "We cannot win this war by conventional means. Their resilience isn't just tactical, it's cultural. If we crush them, we risk creating a force of martyrs. But if we understand them—" He let the words hang in the charged air. "Understand them?" Yarle asked, skepticism lacing her tone. "Yes," Vokar replied, his voice firm. "We need to speak to their leaders, to the ones driving this effort. If there's even a chance to broker a truce, we must take it." The room fell silent, the weight of his words rippling through the gathered officers. The Terxian Empire was not known for diplomacy, especially in the midst of war. Yet the logic of Vokar's proposal was undeniable. Their current approach wasn't enough. They needed something more. Hours later, Vokar stood alone in the observation chamber of his flagship. The room's transparent walls offered an unbroken view of the battlefield, a swirling canvas of fire and starlight. His mind was heavy with the decision he had made, a gamble that could redefine the course of the conflict, or doom them all. His communicator chimed, breaking the quiet. Yarley's voice filled the chamber. "Admiral, we've intercepted a secure communication link between their prototypes. It's being directed to a ground station on Earth." "Patch me through," Vokar said, his tone brooking no delay. Moments later, the holographic display activated, revealing the grainy image of a human officer. The man was young, his face etched with determination but marked by the exhaustion of prolonged battle. His sharp blue eyes narrowed as he studied Vokar's projection. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. Vokar straightened, his holographic disguise shimmering faintly. "I am Admiral Vokar of the Terxian Empire. You are?" "Commander Ethan Vale, United Earth Defense Network." The man's tone was clipped, his posture rigid. "Why are you contacting me?" "Because this war serves neither of us," Vokar replied. "Your tactics are impressive, your technology ingenious, but this path will lead only to mutual ruin." Vale's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the edge of his console. "You didn't come here for peace, Admiral. Your ships fired the first shots." "And I regret that decision," Vokar admitted, his voice carrying the weight of truth. "But I am offering an alternative, a temporary ceasefire. Let us meet face to face and discuss terms." Vale's eyes narrowed further, suspicion flaring. "Why should I believe you?" "Because your people deserve better than annihilation," Vokar said evenly. "And because your anchor cannot protect you forever." The mention of the anchor made Vale stiffen, his gaze sharpening like a blade. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Vokar countered. "Your efforts are admirable, Commander, but they are not invincible. Meet me, and perhaps we can end this war before it consumes us both." A tense silence followed, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Vale exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "All right, Admiral, but if this is a trap, I promise you, humanity will not go quietly." Vokar inclined his head. "Nor should you." The connection ended, leaving Vokar alone with his thoughts. The gamble was in motion, the pieces set. But as he stared out at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that the next move would define not just the war, but the future of two civilizations. The air inside the neutral meeting vessel was tense, thick with unspoken animosity. Admiral Vokar sat across from Commander Ethan Vale at the elongated table, its polished metal surface reflecting the muted glow of the holographic tactical map between them. Around them stood aides and advisors from both sides, their presence silent but palpable. Every breath, every glance carried weight. Vokar's segmented gaze remained fixed on Vale, who studied the holographic projection with furrowed brows. The image displayed the battlefield near Callisto, where humanity's anchor pulsed faintly with energy, protected by a defensive lattice of prototypes and satellites. "We both know this ceasefire is fragile," Vale said, his voice low but resolute. "Your fleet is larger, more advanced. If you wanted to overwhelm us, you'd have done it already." "You assume this war is a matter of capacity," Vokar replied, his tone sharp. "It is not. Victory is irrelevant if the cost leaves us vulnerable to greater threats." Vale's gaze flicked upward, narrowing. "Greater threats? What threats?" Vokar allowed a brief pause, calculating the impact of his next words. "You think your simulations were born of human ingenuity alone? They were not. Your progress was seeded by entities watching from the shadows. You are preparing for a war you don't even know exists." The room fell silent, the revelation hanging like a storm cloud. Vale's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then why attack us? Why fire the first shot if you knew?" "Because your actions were misinterpreted as a prelude to aggression," Vokar admitted, the weight of the admission clear in his voice. "And now we are locked in a conflict neither of us can afford." Vale leaned back, his arms crossed. "So what do you propose, Admiral? Another ceasefire while we wait for these supposed threats to arrive?" "No," Vokar said firmly. A joint strategy. You are adaptable, unpredictable. Your ingenuity could complement our precision. Together, we might have a chance. Vale tilted his head, skepticism flashing in his eyes. You want us to ally with the very fleet that fired on us? That's a hard sell, Admiral. Perhaps, Vokar replied, his mandibles clicking softly. But consider this. Your anchor is the linchpin of your defense. If it falls, you fall. I know its vulnerabilities. I could exploit them, or I could help you reinforce them. The room bristled with tension as Vale absorbed the implications. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice measured. If I agree to this alliance, what's your plan? The tactical discussion stretched long into the night cycle, punctuated by bursts of intense debate. The holographic map became their battlefield, a space where rivalries were suspended in favor of collaboration. Vokar's claws danced across the interface as he outlined his strategy, each motion deliberate and precise. The humans have a decentralized command structure, Vokar began, addressing both his own advisors and Vale's officers. It is both your strength and your weakness. Coordination without a central node allows adaptability, but it also makes synchronization fragile. Vale interjected, his tone sharp. We've accounted for that. Our prototypes are linked via a quantum communication array. And that array is what the entities watching you will target, Vokar countered. They will isolate your fleet by disrupting that link. You must anticipate this. Vale exchanged a glance with one of his aides, a young woman with a thoughtful expression. And how do we do that? She asked. Vokar manipulated the holographic map, highlighting the Callisto region. You create redundancy, he explained. Satellite relays, ground-based command nodes, even manual fallback systems. It will slow your response time, but it will ensure continuity. And your fleet? Vale asked, his voice laced with skepticism. What role do you play in this? Vokar's claws tapped the edge of the console. We will draw attention away from your anchor by feigning a full-scale retreat. When they shift their focus to pursuing us, your prototypes will strike their flanks, using the maneuverability your simulations have perfected. Risky, Vale muttered, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the map. If they don't take the bait, we'll be exposed. That is why we create layers, Vokar said. A web of distractions. Deploy decoy ships armed with energy signatures mimicking critical assets. Seed false data into their scanners. Make them chase shadows. One of Vale's senior officers, an older man with a weathered face, cleared his throat. And what of the anchor itself? If it's as critical as you say, it will still be a target. That, Vokar said, is where precision and ingenuity intersect. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. The Turksian engineers worked alongside human technicians, their collaboration marked by equal parts fascination and friction. The stark contrast between their methodologies, one favoring exacting precision, the other embracing creative improvisation, sparked both arguments and breakthroughs. Vokar observed it all from the command deck of his flagship. The once alien sight of humans working alongside his people now seemed almost natural, their combined efforts creating something neither could achieve alone. Yet the tension of the looming battle was ever present, a weight that pressed against every word and action. Admiral, Yarly said, approaching with a data pad, the decoy fleet is ready. The humans' prototypes have been fitted with enhanced cloaking systems, but their energy draw is significant. They won't need to stay hidden long, Vokar replied. Their purpose is disruption, not endurance. Yarly hesitated, her antennae twitching. Do you truly trust them, Admiral? Vokar's gaze flicked to the tactical display. Trust is irrelevant. Necessity binds us. And for now, their survival ensures ours. The day of the battle arrived with a quiet that felt unnatural. The Terxian fleet hovered in the void, their ships gleaming like shards of obsidian against the star-speckled backdrop. Nearby, the human prototypes moved into position, their designs jagged and unconventional, yet exuding a predatory grace. Vokar stood at the center of the command chamber, the weight of the moment pressing against him. Vale's voice crackled over the secure communication link. We're in position. Decoys deployed. Understood, Vokar replied. Remember, Commander, Hesitation will cost you everything. The first move came without warning. From the darkness beyond, Callisto emerged a wave of hostile entities, ships of unfamiliar design, their forms jagged and shifting as if pulled from a nightmare. They moved with unsettling fluidity, their energy signatures defying conventional analysis. "They're here," Jarley said, her voice tight. "Execute the plan," Vokar ordered. The Terxian fleet began their feigned retreat, their engines flaring as they pulled away from the anchor's position. The hostile ships pursued, their movements erratic, yet deliberate. Meanwhile, the human prototypes struck from the shadows, their cloaking systems flickering as they unleashed precise volleys of fire. The battlefield erupted into chaos, a symphony of light and motion where every decision carried the weight of survival. As Vokar issued orders, his claws steady against the console, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar: hope. This was not a battle of dominance or destruction. It was something far more profound. It was the birth of understanding. The battlefield burned with chaos. Shards of twisted debris spun through the void, colliding in bursts of incandescent sparks. The combined fleets of humanity and Terxian forces danced a precarious waltz, outnumbered but not outmaneuvered. Vokar stood firm at the helm of his flagship, his segmented gaze dissecting every fleeting moment of the unfolding battle. The console before him pulsed with tactical overlays, each line and curve mapping decisions that balanced on a knife's edge. "Admiral," Jarley's voice cut through the static, sharp and urgent. "The anchor's defenses are holding, but the enemy has intensified its assault. They've deployed disruptor arrays targeting the orbital relay." "They're pushing for fracture points," Vokar replied, his claws grazing the holographic interface. "They want to split our coordination, adjust countermeasures, deploy Pattern Omega near their disruptors." Jarley nodded, relaying the orders. The Terxian vessels adjusted with swift precision, creating an overlapping shield grid around humanity's prototypes. Their plasma arrays erupted in synchrony, carving luminous paths through the enemy's fleet. Yet even as they pushed the invaders back, Vokar knew the battle was accelerating toward its climax. The secure line chimed. Commander Ethan Vale's voice came through, laced with tension but unwavering. "Admiral, our prototypes can't hold the anchor's position much longer. Whatever your plan is, we need it now." Vokar's mandibles clicked faintly, his thoughts razor-sharp. "Then we finish this together, Commander." Vale exhaled audibly. "I hope your gamble is worth the risk." "It must be," Vokar said, the weight of his words like an unspoken oath. The enemy's assault intensified. Their jagged ships slithered through space, firing beams that sliced through the darkness with eerie precision. One of the Terxian frigates disintegrated under a focused barrage, its remains cascading into silence. The loss was felt like a distant wound, but Vokar pushed the thought aside. There was no time for grief, only action. "Admiral," Jarley called, her tone steeled with urgency. "Their disruptors are shifting patterns. They're adapting." "So will we," Vokar replied, his voice edged with determination. "Signal the decoy fleet. Initiate full burn toward the enemy's flagship." Jarley hesitated, her antennae twitching. "They'll see through it." "That's the point," Vokar said, his mandibles clicking with finality. "They'll focus on the decoys, giving us the window we need." The decoy ships surged forward, their energy signatures mimicking critical assets. The enemy fleet shifted almost immediately, converging on the false targets with a ruthless precision. But it was a feint, and behind the cover of the decoys, the combined Terxian and human forces surged toward the true objective, the command vessel coordinating the enemy's assault. Vale's voice crackled over the channel. "We're in position, Admiral. What's the next move?" Vokar stared at the tactical map, his claws tightening. "Your prototypes must disable their central node. It's the key to unraveling their coordination. We'll cover your approach." "Understood," Vale said. His tone carried no doubt, only resolve. "You heard him. Move!" The prototypes darted forward, their movements sharp and calculated. Their angular designs sliced through the void, weaving between enemy ships with relentless focus. Terxian cruisers shielded their advance, plasma turrets firing in precise bursts that forced the enemy to react. Every second was a fragile victory, every maneuver a precarious dance. One of the prototypes veered sharply, avoiding a collision with a debris field. Its pilot's voice crackled through the comms, strained but defiant. "We're through the first barrier, preparing to engage." Vokar watched intently, his neural interface processing every detail. "Hold your formation. The central node is shielded by overlapping arrays. You'll need to disrupt them simultaneously." Vale's voice cut through the channel, steady as stone. "We've trained for this. Just keep them off us." The enemy fleet pressed harder, their movements frantic but vicious. They were no longer executing a strategy. They were responding to desperation, and desperation made them unpredictable. "Admiral," Jarly said, her tone edged with urgency. "The decoys are falling. The enemy's beginning to redirect." "Then we give them no time to recover," Vokar replied. "Deploy all remaining forces to their flanks. Overload their left perimeter. Push them into disarray." The Terxian fleet surged forward, plasma arrays erupting in a cascade of light. Human prototypes darted alongside them, their weapon systems synchronized with Terxian fire patterns. It was a symphony of chaos and unity, a testament to what their alliance had achieved in so little time. Jarle nodded, relaying the orders. The Terxian vessels adjusted with swift precision, creating an overlapping shield grid around humanity's prototypes. Their plasma arrays erupted in synchrony, carving luminous paths through the enemy's fleet. Yet even as they pushed the invaders back, Vokar knew the battle was accelerating toward its climax. The secure line chimed. Commander Ethan Vale's voice came through, laced with tension but unwavering. "Admiral, our prototypes can't hold the anchor's position much longer. Whatever your plan is, we need it now." Vokar's mandibles clicked faintly, his thoughts razor-sharp. "Then we finish this together, Commander." Vale exhaled audibly. "I hope your gamble is worth the risk." "It must be," Vokar said, the weight of his words like an unspoken oath. The enemy's assault intensified. Their jagged ships slithered through space, firing beams that sliced through the darkness with eerie precision. One of the Terxian frigates disintegrated under a focused barrage, its remains cascading into silence. The loss was felt like a distant wound, but Vokar pushed the thought aside. There was no time for grief, only action. "Admiral," Jarly called, her tone steeled with urgency. "Their disruptors are shifting patterns. They're adapting." "So will we," Vokar replied, his voice edged with determination. "Signal the decoy fleet. Initiate full burn toward the enemy's flagship." Jarly hesitated, her antennae twitching. "They'll see through it." "That's the point," Vokar said, his mandibles clicking with finality. "They'll focus on the decoys, giving us the window we need." The decoy ships surged forward, their energy signatures mimicking critical assets. The enemy fleet shifted almost immediately, converging on the false targets with a ruthless precision. But it was a feint, and behind the cover of the decoys, the combined Terxian and human forces surged toward the true objective, the command vessel coordinating the enemy's assault. Vale's voice crackled over the channel. "We're in position, Admiral. What's the next move?" Vokar stared at the tactical map, his claws tightening. "Your prototypes must disable their central node. It's the key to unraveling their coordination. We'll cover your approach." "Understood," Vale said. His tone carried no doubt, only resolve. "You heard him. Move!" The prototypes darted forward, their movements sharp and calculated. Their angular designs sliced through the void, weaving between enemy ships with relentless focus. Terxian cruisers shielded their advance, plasma turrets firing in precise bursts that forced the enemy to react. Every second was a fragile victory, every maneuver a precarious dance. One of the prototypes veered sharply, avoiding a collision with a debris field. Its pilot's voice crackled through the comms, strained but defiant. "We're through the first barrier, preparing to engage." Vokar watched intently, his neural interface processing every detail. "Hold your formation. The central node is shielded by overlapping arrays. You'll need to disrupt them simultaneously." Vale's voice cut through the channel, steady as stone. "We've trained for this. Just keep them off us." The enemy fleet pressed harder, their movements frantic but vicious. They were no longer executing a strategy. They were responding to desperation, and desperation made them unpredictable. "Admiral," Charlie said, her tone edged with urgency. "The decoys are falling. The enemy's beginning to redirect." "Then we give them no time to recover," Vokar replied. "Deploy all remaining forces to their flanks. Overload their left perimeter. Push them into disarray." The Terxian fleet surged forward, plasma arrays erupting in a cascade of light. Human prototypes darted alongside them, their weapon systems synchronized with Terxian fire patterns. It was a symphony of chaos and unity, a testament to what their alliance had achieved in so little time. Vale's voice came through again, this time sharper. "We're at the node. Engaging disruptor arrays." The prototypes opened fire, their energy beams converging on the central node's shielded core. The enemy ships scrambled to respond, their formation unraveling as they attempted to protect their command vessel. But the combined assault was unrelenting, each strike peeling away layers of defense. "Shield integrity at 30%, one of the human pilots reported. "We're breaking through." "Then finish it," Vale said, his voice fierce. "No second chances." The final volley came with blinding brilliance. The prototype's coordinated fire pierced the node's core, triggering a chain reaction that rippled through the enemy fleet. Their ships faltered, their movements growing erratic as their coordination collapsed. The once imposing force dissolved into chaos. "It's done," Vale said, his voice heavy with exhaustion but victorious. "The node's destroyed." Vokar stared at the battlefield, his segmented eyes scanning the remnants of the enemy fleet. They were scattered, vulnerable, but he gave no order to pursue. Instead, he turned to Yarli. "Signal the fleet to hold position. This battle is over." Yarli hesitated but obeyed, her voice steady as she relayed the command. The Terxian and human ships held their ground, watching as the enemy vessels retreated into the void. Vale's voice came through one last time, quieter now. "We did it." "No," Vokar said, his tone somber. "You did it. Your people, your ingenuity, your tenacity. This victory belongs to humanity." Vale was silent for a moment before he spoke again, his voice carrying a weight of its own. "We couldn't have done it alone, Admiral. And maybe that's the lesson here. We're stronger together." Vokar's gaze drifted to the anchor, still pulsing faintly in the distance. The battle had ended, but the war wasn't over. It had only shifted into a new chapter, one defined by collaboration, not conflict. As the fleets began their slow withdrawal, Vokar stood in silence, his thoughts heavy with possibility. He had seen the power of humanity's spirit, their ability to turn even games into tools of survival, and in their relentless determination, he saw something profound. Not conquerors, not warriors, innovators, survivors, allies. As the stars reclaimed the void, Vokar allowed himself the faintest trace of hope. The galaxy had changed that day, and it had been humanity's hand that guided the shift. Their games had proven more than play. They had been the foundation of something far greater. And perhaps in the end, the lesson was simple. The universe would never be the same because humanity refused to be anything less than extraordinary.